He thought a quiet woman in a gray cardigan would be the easiest person to break that morning, but Judge Raymond Holloway had no idea he was about to begin the collapse of his own career. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Naomi Carter. The county courthouse stood in the center of Ashford like a monument to authority, its white stone columns catching the cold light of a late October morning. Inside, polished marble floors reflected the movement of hurried shoes, legal folders, and anxious faces. Every sound seemed sharper there, every whisper heavier. Naomi Carter stepped through the front doors alone, carrying a worn leather folder close to her side. At 38, she had the calm presence of someone who had learned long ago not to waste energy proving herself to strangers. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly back. Her gray cardigan was plain, her shoes practical, her expression unreadable. To most people passing by, she looked like another nervous citizen called into a system too large to fight. That was exactly what Judge Holloway expected. Upstairs in courtroom 3B, Raymond Holloway adjusted the cuffs of his expensive navy robe and studied the morning docket with a satisfied look. At 57, he had built a reputation that depended less on fairness than fear. Attorneys lowered their voices around him. Clerks rushed when he snapped his fingers. Local officials praised his efficiency while privately avoiding his temper. He liked power best when it was visible. And today, he intended to display it. He tapped Naomi Carter's file with one finger. A minor administrative citation. Small enough to seem harmless. Public enough to become a lesson. He still remembered the town budget meeting 3 months earlier when Naomi had stood at a microphone and politely questioned how certain municipal penalties were being redirected into private contracts connected to his allies. She had spoken without raising her voice, without drama, and somehow that had stung him more than shouting ever could. She had made him feel exposed. Men like Holloway never forgot that feeling. Bring her in first, he told Clerk Mason Reed. Mason hesitated for half a second, then nodded. He had seen this mood before. It usually meant someone ordinary was about to have a very bad morning. By 9 o'clock, the courtroom gallery had filled with the usual mix of waiting defendants, attorneys checking watches, and curious observers looking for a little drama before lunch. Reporter Olivia Grant slipped quietly into the second row with a notebook on her lap. She covered local government and had learned that whenever Holloway seemed unusually cheerful, something worth noting often followed. Bailiff Trevor Mills opened the side door and called the room to order. Chairs scraped. Conversations died. A hush settled across the chamber. Then Naomi entered. She walked steadily to the defense table, set down her folder, and folded her hands. No panic. No trembling. No frantic glances. Holloway noticed immediately and disliked it. He preferred visible fear. It made the room easier to control. He leaned forward, voice rich with practiced authority. Ms. Carter, he said, drawing out each syllable as though addressing a child. I trust you understand the seriousness of appearing before this court today. A few people in the gallery turned to look at her. Naomi lifted her eyes. I understand I received a summons, Your Honor. Her tone was respectful, even gentle. Holloway smiled thinly. Good. Because some people confuse public opinion with legal knowledge. A ripple of restrained amusement moved through the room. He let it happen. Naomi said nothing. She simply looked at him with a steadiness that felt strangely out of place in that room. Holloway's smile tightened. He mistook silence for weakness. Across the courtroom, Olivia Grant uncapped her pen. Mason Reed swallowed hard. And somewhere beneath the polished rituals of courtroom 3B, the first crack had already begun. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair as if the matter were already decided. He enjoyed that posture, the slight angle of confidence that told everyone in the room he believed himself untouchable. Sunlight from the tall courthouse windows stretched across the polished wood benches, cutting bright lines through the stillness. Naomi Carter remained seated at the defense table, hands folded over her worn leather folder, calm in a room designed to make ordinary people feel small. Holloway opened the file and glanced down with theatrical impatience. "Ms. Carter, you are here regarding failure to comply with county administrative directives and failure to appear after notice." His voice carried across the courtroom with practiced weight. Several people in the gallery exchanged looks. The language sounded serious enough to alarm anyone unfamiliar with legal procedure. Naomi did not move. "Your Honor," she said softly, "that description is inaccurate." Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Inaccurate?" He repeated the word as though it amused him. "How fortunate that we have you here to educate the court." A few restrained chuckles floated through the benches. He welcomed them. Public embarrassment worked best with an audience. Naomi turned slightly toward the bench. "I received no valid notice requiring appearance prior to today, and the citation was resolved by payment 3 weeks ago." The room grew quieter. Holloway's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had expected nervous excuses, not precise language. "Resolved," he said. "That is a bold conclusion for someone without legal training." Naomi met his gaze. "Whether I have training or not does not alter the county receipt number attached to page 4 of your file." Clerk Mason Reed froze at his desk. He knew page 4. He had placed the receipt there himself after finding it in the electronic records late the night before. Holloway slowly turned the page, buying time with deliberate movements. The receipt was there. Date stamped. Payment accepted. He closed the file halfway. "Administrative systems are often imperfect," he said smoothly. "Clerical errors happen." Mason lowered his eyes. The statement landed like a stone. Everyone knew. Who was being blamed without being named? Reporter Olivia Grant's pen moved faster. Naomi's expression did not change. "They do," she said. "Which is why accountability matters." A hush fell over the room. Holloway straightened in his chair. "Be careful, Ms. Carter. This is not a town hall meeting. You are not here to give speeches." Naomi nodded once. "I agree, Your Honor. I am here to address facts." The bailiff glanced toward the gallery, sensing the shift in mood. Holloway decided to press harder. Men like him often mistook pressure for control. "Then let us discuss facts," he said sharply. "You have repeatedly inserted yourself into county matters beyond your expertise. Budget hearings. Public records requests. Complaints regarding judicial conduct. It seems you enjoy attention." The accusation hung in the room. Naomi let the silence breathe before answering. "I volunteer at the public library," she said. "People come to me when they cannot understand forms, notices, fines, or where their money is going. Sometimes questions follow." Olivia Grant looked up from her notebook. "That line would make tomorrow's paper if the day kept moving this direction." Holloway drummed 2 fingers on the bench. "You are implying corruption." Naomi answered with measured calm. "I am implying confusion. Corruption is a legal conclusion requiring evidence." The courtroom went still. Even attorneys waiting for unrelated matters stopped pretending not to listen. Holloway opened his mouth, then closed it. She had corrected him without sounding disrespectful. Worse, she had done it cleanly. He shifted tone. "Very well. Since you seem eager to participate, perhaps you can explain why a private citizen appears to know so much procedural language." Naomi glanced at the folder before her, then back to the bench. "Because I read what others ignore." Mason Reed's hands trembled over the keyboard. Olivia Grant underlined the sentence twice. Holloway felt something unfamiliar creeping beneath his robe and polished authority. It was not anger. It was the first cold edge of uncertainty. And for the first time that morning, Judge Raymond Holloway realized the quiet woman at the defense table was not trapped with him. He might be trapped with her. The air inside courtroom 3B changed in ways no one could measure but everyone could feel. Moments earlier, Judge Holloway had controlled the room with tone, posture, and reputation. Now the authority he wore so comfortably seemed to fit less securely. He reached for his water glass, took a careful sip, and set it down with more force than necessary. Naomi Carter remained still at the defense table, her calm becoming more unsettling with every passing second. Holloway decided what many arrogant men decide when logic fails them. He would attack character instead. "Ms. Carter," he said, voice sharpened again, "you present yourself as some kind of civic watchdog. Yet from what I see, you are simply someone with too much free time and too many opinions." A few uneasy smiles flickered in the gallery but disappeared quickly. The room no longer trusted his humor. Naomi answered without haste. "I work full-time at the Ashford Public Library." She paused just long enough to let the fact settle. "Most afternoons I help seniors understand notices they cannot read easily, veterans navigate benefit forms, and working parents contest fees they cannot afford." Even bailiff Trevor Mills shifted his stance. Holloway had expected defensiveness. Instead, she offered service. "Very touching," he replied. "But none of that qualifies you to challenge this court." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Qualification is not required to ask whether procedures are followed." Clerk Mason Reed stared at his keyboard, pretending to type. He knew she was right. Holloway knew it too. That was the problem. "You seem remarkably confident for someone in your position," Holloway said. "Tell me, Miss Carter, have you always enjoyed pretending to be an attorney?" The insult landed harder than he intended because it revealed something else beneath it, curiosity. Why did she speak like one? Why did she know where to strike? Naomi opened her leather folder for the first time. The old hinge creaked softly in the silence. She removed several neatly organized documents held together with plain binder clips. No flourish. No drama. Just preparation. "No, Your Honor," she said. "I have never pretended to be an attorney." She placed one document on the table. "I simply studied under one." Holloway frowned. "Meaning what?" Naomi looked directly at him. "My father, Daniel Carter, argued administrative law for 32 years in federal and state courts. He taught me that power is most dangerous when no one reads the fine print." A murmur rolled through the benches. Older attorneys in the gallery recognized the name immediately. Daniel Carter had once been respected across 3 counties for exposing procurement fraud and unlawful fee practices. Holloway's expression hardened. He knew the name as well. Years ago, Carter had embarrassed several officials who believed themselves insulated from consequences. Olivia Grant nearly dropped her pen before catching it. This story had just become much larger than a citation hearing. Holloway tried to recover with a dismissive laugh. "Family stories do not make legal arguments." Naomi nodded. "Correct. Records do." She slid a second paper onto the table. "County Ordinance Revisions from last spring. Section 12. The citation category used against me was repealed and replaced 91 days before my summons was issued." Mason Reed's face lost color. He remembered seeing that update in the training memo no one read carefully enough. Holloway's hand stopped moving. "That cannot be accurate." Naomi's voice remained gentle. "The clerk's office website still has the archived bulletin if the court would like to verify." Olivia Grant was already searching it on her phone beneath the bench rail. 2 taps later, there it was. Archived bulletin. Effective date exactly as Naomi stated. She slowly raised her eyes toward the bench. Holloway noticed and looked away first. The courtroom went silent. Not dramatic silence. Dangerous silence. The kind that arrives when truth enters a room where lies have been comfortable for too long. Holloway shuffled papers that no longer helped him. Naomi closed her folder and rested her hands again. She had not raised her voice once. She had not insulted him once. Yet piece by piece, the structure around him was beginning to crack. And every person in that courtroom could now see it. Judge Holloway felt the room slipping inch by inch, and men who worship control rarely surrender it gracefully. He straightened the papers before him, though they no longer held answers. His voice returned colder than before, stripped of charm and edged with irritation. This court will not be lectured by a citizen who mistakes internet searches for expertise. He glanced toward the gallery as if inviting agreement, but no laughter came. Even the benches seemed to reject him now. Naomi Carter remained seated, hands resting lightly on her closed folder. Then perhaps the court should verify the statute directly, she said. Her tone was so calm it sounded almost kind. Holloway ignored the suggestion. What I see is a pattern, he continued. Public disruptions, accusations against officials, and now an attempt to undermine lawful proceedings. Some might call that harassment. Reporter Olivia Grant looked up sharply. That word mattered. Holloway was trying to turn scrutiny into misconduct. Naomi did not blink. Some might, she replied. Others might call it public participation. A low murmur passed through the room. Holloway struck his gavel once, more to steady himself than to restore order. Enough. Since you appear determined to challenge authority, let us discuss your motives. Have you sought office, Ms. Carter? Donations? Attention? Employment with activists? The questions came fast, less like inquiry and more like fishing in muddy water. Naomi answered each one with the same measured stillness. No, Your Honor. No. No. And no. Holloway leaned forward. Then why persist? Naomi looked around the courtroom before answering, taking in the anxious faces waiting their turn, the folders clutched by working people, the elderly man in the third row trying to read a notice through thick glasses. Because confusion is expensive, she said quietly. And it is usually charged to those who can least afford it. The words landed heavier than any shout. Bailiff Trevor Mills lowered his eyes. Mason Reed stopped typing entirely. Holloway felt the sympathy in the room shifting toward her and away from him. That could not be allowed. You presume corruption where there is only administration, he snapped. Naomi turned back to the bench. No, Your Honor. I presume nothing. I compare dates, signatures, fee schedules, and code revisions. Then she reopened her folder and removed another document. The sound of paper sliding across would seem loud in the silence. For example, this notice template. Holloway's expression tightened. Naomi continued. The summons mailed to me cites a formatting version retired 6 months ago. It also uses a departmental seal discontinued after the county audit. Mason Reed's head lifted suddenly. He knew exactly what she meant. Last month he had found a stack of outdated templates in storage. They were supposed to be destroyed. Holloway spoke too quickly. Irrelevant. Naomi's eyes stayed steady. If obsolete forms are being used selectively, relevance depends on who benefits. Olivia Grant's pen flew across the page. An attorney waiting for another case slowly sat back down, no longer pretending he needed to leave. Holloway's face reddened, though his voice fought to remain composed. Are you accusing this court of misconduct? Naomi answered with surgical precision. I am asking whether standard procedures apply equally to everyone. The courtroom went still again. It was the kind of silence that exposed hierarchy for what it was. Holloway reached for the file, turned pages, then stopped when he realized his own hands were no longer steady. He glanced toward Mason Reed. "Clerk, verify these claims." Mason swallowed. "Your Honor, the archived ordinance date appears correct, and the seal she referenced was replaced in April." Holloway froze mid-motion. The words had come from his own clerk. Publicly. On record. A hush fell over the room, so complete that the distant hum of fluorescent lights could be heard overhead. Naomi did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply waited, dignified and patient, while the truth did what anger never could. For the first time in years, Judge Raymond Holloway was the one being watched with doubt, and he knew the next mistake might not be forgotten. Judge Holloway had spent years teaching rooms like this to fear pauses, raised eyebrows, and the weight of his displeasure. But now every tool that once served him seemed dull in his hands. He looked down from the bench and found not submission, but patience. Naomi Carter sat exactly as before, composed, her folder neatly aligned on the table. It was a quiet kind of confidence, and quiet confidence unsettles people who rely on noise. Holloway cleared his throat. "This hearing has become disorderly due to irrelevant distractions." His voice tried to reclaim command, but even he could hear the strain in it. "The court will proceed to disposition." Reporter Olivia Grant immediately underlined the phrase. He was trying to rush past the damage. Naomi rose slowly to her feet. "Your Honor, before disposition, I request clarification for the record." Holloway's jaw tightened. "You are in no position to request anything." Naomi did not sit down. "Then I respectfully ask as a citizen whose name appears on that file." A few people in the gallery nodded almost invisibly. Holloway noticed and hated it. "State your point," he said sharply. Naomi opened her folder once more and withdrew a thin stack of papers. "These are copies of public records requests I filed over the past 6 months concerning citation revenue transfers, contractor payments, and obsolete enforcement notices." She placed them on the table one by one. All unanswered. The courtroom seemed to lean forward. Holloway stared at the pages as if they had insulted him personally. "Administrative delays are common," he said. Naomi answered at once. 3 requests exceeded statutory response deadlines by more than 90 days. Mason Reed closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had seen those requests routed, delayed, redirected, then ignored. Holloway's fingers pressed against the bench. "This matter is unrelated." Naomi's eyes remained steady. It became related when an expired citation category was used to summon the person asking questions. A hush fell across the room. Even the fluorescent lights seemed louder now. Olivia Grant looked from Naomi to Holloway and knew she was witnessing the exact second a routine courthouse story became a front-page scandal. Holloway struck the gavel again. The sound echoed harder than before and achieved less. "You are dangerously close to contempt." Naomi inclined her head politely. "Contempt usually requires disrespect, Your Honor." "I am discussing documents." A suppressed breath moved through the benches. One attorney in the back lowered his briefcase to the floor and sat back down, unwilling to miss another second. Holloway changed tactics once more. "Ms. Carter, are you represented by counsel?" Naomi answered, "No, Your Honor." His expression brightened for the first time in minutes. "Then perhaps you should stop pretending to understand procedural boundaries." Naomi reached into her folder and removed one final item, folded carefully with age. She opened it and placed it flat on the table. "I understand enough to know when they are crossed." Mason Reed leaned forward. Olivia Grant stood halfway before catching herself. It was a letter on old legal stationery signed by Daniel Carter, Naomi's father, dated 12 years earlier. Holloway recognized the name instantly. So did 2 older attorneys in the gallery. Naomi spoke softly. "When my father was ill, he wrote me one last note. He said, if a room uses titles to silence truth, speak with records. Titles fade. Records remain. No one moved. Holloway's face lost color by degrees. He remembered Daniel Carter. He remembered hearings that ended careers, audits that followed arrogance, and officials who once laughed until subpoenas arrived. Naomi was not threatening him. She did not need to. She was reminding him of standards he had spent years outrunning. Holloway looked toward Mason Reed. "Remove those papers from the table." Mason did not move. "Clerk," Holloway barked. Mason swallowed, then spoke carefully. "Your Honor, anything submitted during open hearing may become part of the record pending review." The room went silent. His own clerk had corrected him twice in one morning. Holloway stared at Mason, then at Naomi, then at the gallery full of witnesses who would carry this story beyond the courthouse walls. Naomi gently closed her folder and remained standing. She had not raised her voice once. Yet power was shifting in plain sight, and everyone in the room knew who still possessed dignity. Judge Holloway understood something dangerous now. He was no longer managing a hearing. He was surviving one. The courtroom that had once mirrored his confidence now reflected every weakness back at him. Faces in the gallery were no longer anxious about their own cases. They were watching him. Reporter Olivia Grant had stopped pretending to take casual notes and was writing with the focused speed of someone who knew the headline had already chosen itself. Holloway adjusted the microphone in front of him, buying seconds he did not have. "The court will take a brief recess," he announced. Naomi Carter remained standing. "Before recess, Your Honor, may I ask one final procedural question for the record?" Holloway's eyes narrowed. "No," Naomi nodded once. "Then I will ask after recess." It was not defiance. It was patience. Somehow that made it worse. Holloway rose and disappeared through the side door with the quick stride of a man trying not to appear hurried. The room exhaled all at once. Voices returned in cautious whispers. Trevor Mills stepped to his post, keeping order while glancing more than once toward Naomi. Mason Reed remained at the clerk's desk, staring at the docket screen without seeing it. Naomi sat back down and calmly returned each paper to her folder in perfect order. Olivia Grant approached within a respectful distance. "Ms. Carter, are you willing to comment?" Naomi looked up gently. "Not while proceedings are active." Olivia gave a small nod. Even now, the woman everyone had underestimated was the most disciplined person in the room. 10 minutes later the side door opened again. Holloway returned with a different expression, one polished into place. Men in trouble often mistake composure for recovery. He sat, straightened the robe at his shoulders, and called the room back to order. "Upon further review," he said, "certain administrative irregularities may require internal examination." The phrase was carefully chosen, sterile and bloodless. Naomi listened without reaction. Holloway continued. "Therefore, the citation against Ms. Carter is dismissed in the interest of efficiency." A murmur swept the benches. He wanted gratitude. He wanted escape. Naomi stood once more. "Thank you, Your Honor. My procedural question remains." Holloway's lips thinned. "State it briefly." Naomi opened her folder and removed a single sheet. "If this citation was issued under a repealed code, on an obsolete form, after payment had already been accepted, and then prosecuted after multiple unanswered records requests, what process exists to review all similarly issued citations?" The courtroom went silent so suddenly that even the heating vent could be heard humming overhead. Holloway did not answer immediately. He knew the danger at once. If he said none, he admitted failure. If he said one existed, people would ask why it had not been used. Naomi's voice remained respectful. "Because if the error affected me, it may have affected many others." An elderly man in the third row slowly raised a folded notice in his hand. A young mother near the aisle looked down at her own paperwork. Two waiting defendants began comparing dates on their envelopes. The room was changing from audience to witness. Holloway forced a thin smile. Citizens with concerns may file appropriate petitions. Naomi replied, with which office, Your Honor? He froze for half a beat. Mason Reed quietly spoke into the silence. County Compliance Review handles administrative citation audits. Holloway turned sharply toward his clerk, but the damage was done. Pens moved. Phones were opened. Names were being remembered. Olivia Grant underlined County Compliance Review 3 times. Naomi inclined her head toward Mason. Thank you. Then she looked back to the bench. I appreciate the clarification. Holloway could only nod once. He had dismissed her case, yet somehow she had expanded the consequences. She gathered her folder, buttoned her gray cardigan, and stepped away from the table. No celebration. No smirk. No speech. As she passed the gallery, several strangers moved aside with the instinctive respect reserved for people who remain steady under pressure. Holloway watched her reach the doors he once expected her to leave in humiliation. Instead, she left carrying something he could not order returned. Credibility. And as the doors closed softly behind her, the courthouse no longer felt like it belonged to him. By noon, the story had moved faster than Judge Holloway ever imagined possible. Courthouse whispers became hallway conversations became phone calls, and phone calls became headlines. Outside the stone steps of the Ashford County Courthouse, reporters gathered beneath a gray autumn sky while citizens who had arrived for errands stayed to watch history rearrange itself. Naomi Carter stepped through the front doors carrying the same worn leather folder she had carried in that morning, but the crowd now moved with a different energy around her. People no longer saw an ordinary woman caught in a legal mess. They saw someone who had spoken calmly where others trembled. Olivia Grant reached her first. Ms. Carter, one question. Did you plan this? Naomi paused on the top step, the wind lifting a loose strand of hair near her cheek. I planned to answer questions honestly, she said. Everything else belonged to the facts. Cameras clicked. Microphones leaned forward. Her answer was brief, but it carried the kind of weight that rehearsed speeches never do. Down inside courtroom 3B, Judge Holloway tried to continue the docket as though nothing had happened. Next matter, he called, voice stern and clipped. But the room no longer responded with old obedience. Attorneys glanced at one another before approaching. Defendants who once looked intimidated now looked curious. Even routine questions took longer because people had begun asking for clarification. They wanted dates explained. Fees defined. Procedures repeated. Holloway discovered that authority becomes slower the moment citizens start reading. Clerk Mason Reed processed files with shaking hands. Every folder now looked dangerous. Every stamp seemed like evidence waiting to be noticed. During a brief pause, he leaned toward the microphone. Your Honor, County Compliance Review has requested copies of this morning's docket materials. Holloway stared at him. Requested by whom? Mason swallowed. Director's office. A hush passed through the room. Holloway turned a page that did not need turning. Men who once enjoyed informal power often fear formal oversight more than scandal itself. Across town at the public library, Naomi returned to work before 1 o'clock. She placed her cardigan on the back of her chair, logged into the front desk computer, and helped a retired mechanic reset his online tax portal password. Then she showed a single mother how to print school enrollment forms. Then she helped an elderly woman understand a utility notice. No announcement. No audience. The young page working beside her finally whispered, "Were you really on the news?" Naomi smiled faintly. For about 5 minutes. These forms will matter longer. The page never forgot that answer. At 3:15, Olivia Grant's article went live. Ashford judge dismisses case after courtroom errors exposed. Subheading: Questions raised about obsolete forms, repealed codes, and unanswered public records requests. By 3:30, county commissioners were issuing statements about transparency. By 4, local radio hosts were reading excerpts on air. By 4:30, 2 attorneys who had once stayed quiet began calling former clients about old citations. Holloway read every word alone in chambers, each sentence tightening the room around him. The polished desk, framed certificates, and heavy shelves that once made visitors feel small now felt like props from a fading play. He called a political ally and got voicemail. He called another and was told they would circle back tomorrow. He knew that phrase. It meant distance. At 5 o'clock, Mason Reed knocked softly and entered with a sealed envelope. This was hand-delivered, Your Honor. Holloway opened it and read in silence. Request for immediate preservation of records pending administrative review. His face drained slowly. Mason stood motionless. Holloway looked up. Who authorized this? Mason answered carefully. The county counsel's office. Holloway set the paper down as though it might burn him. Outside, the courthouse bells marked the hour. Inside the library, Naomi was shelving returned books on civic history. She had not shouted. She had not threatened anyone. She had simply insisted that words on paper mean something. And by evening, an entire county was beginning to remember that they do. The next morning Ashford woke to a town that sounded different. At diners, gas stations, barber shops, and school drop-off lines, people were no longer discussing weather or football scores first. They were talking about forms, fees, dates, and the quiet woman who had asked the questions everyone else thought they were not allowed to ask. In places where people usually complained softly and moved on, something rarer had arrived. Curiosity with courage. Naomi Carter unlocked the front doors of the public library at 8 sharp. The scent of paper, polished wood, and old heating vents greeted her like it always did. She preferred rooms where information was organized and available to anyone willing to look. Before she reached the front desk, she noticed 6 people waiting outside with folders in their hands. By 8:30 there were 12. We heard you might know where to start, said a contractor who believed he had paid duplicate county penalties. My late fee doubled in 1 week, said a waitress clutching notices in a grocery bag. I never understood this citation, said an elderly veteran holding an envelope unopened for months. Naomi did not become dramatic. She did what she always did. She made a sign on plain white paper that read, Public Records Forms Available Here. Then she began helping one person at a time. Across town, the county administration building was less calm. Hallways that usually moved with bureaucratic slowness now buzzed with purposeful footsteps. Phones rang without pause. Commissioners requested summaries. Department heads asked to approve obsolete templates. Assistants repeated phrases like, internal review, and, pending guidance, while trying not to sound alarmed. Judge Holloway arrived through a private entrance and found 2 reporters waiting near the elevators. He kept walking. Cameras followed. Your Honor, did your court knowingly use repealed code sections? Your Honor, how many citations may be affected? Your Honor, have you been contacted by county counsel? He said nothing. Silence can look dignified when chosen early. Chosen late, it looks like retreat. In chambers, he discovered another envelope on his desk. Notice of temporary administrative inquiry. Required appearance before Judicial Conduct Review Panel at 2 o'clock. He read it twice, then a third time more slowly, as if pace might change meaning. It did not. At 1:55 he entered the review room on the 4th floor. No bench. No elevated seat. No robe. Just a long oak table beneath fluorescent lights and 3 panel members with legal pads open before them. The room had no audience, yet it felt more exposing than any courtroom. Across from him sat County Counsel Meredith Sloan, known for speaking plainly and billing by the hour. Beside her were retired Judge Eleanor Pike and Ethics Chair Leonard Voss. None looked impressed. "Judge Holloway," Sloan began, "we are reviewing procedural irregularities, potential retaliatory enforcement, and records preservation concerns." Holloway straightened his tie. "This is politically motivated noise amplified by media." Pike did not look up. "Then the record should clear you quickly." Voss slid a packet across the table. "Please explain why a dismissed citation used a code repealed 91 days earlier." Holloway opened his mouth, then stopped. There are moments when arrogance meets documentation and discovers volume is useless. At the library, Naomi helped a teenage student print scholarship forms. Then she showed a mechanic how to request payment history records online. Then she handed a stack of complaint templates to 3 neighbors who had never met before that morning. People who arrive alone often leave stronger when they leave informed. By late afternoon, Olivia Grant's second article went live. Citizens flood library seeking records after courtroom controversy. Included was a photo of Naomi standing beside a folding table covered in forms, sleeves rolled slightly, expression calm. No speech. No pose. Just service. Judge Holloway saw the image on his phone while waiting outside the review room for a follow-up interview. He looked down at his polished shoes, then back at the screen. The woman he tried to embarrass had become the face of public trust in less than 24 hours. The room went silent. Around him, and for once it was not his silence to command. 3 weeks later, winter sunlight spilled across the steps of the Ashford County Courthouse, touching the same white stone columns that had once framed Judge Holloway's confidence. But confidence built on fear rarely survives daylight. The county seal still hung above the entrance, polished and official, yet something inside the building had changed. Signs now listed citizen rights beside payment windows. Updated fee schedules were posted in clear print. Public records request forms sat in neat stacks where none had existed before. Employees who once rushed people away now answered questions twice if needed. Systems had not become perfect. They had simply been reminded they belonged to the public. At 9 o'clock sharp, County Counsel Meredith Sloan stepped before a cluster of microphones in the press room. Her statement was short, careful, and devastating in its simplicity. Following review of administrative practices, Judge Raymond Holloway has been placed on indefinite leave pending further proceedings. The county has initiated an audit of prior citations and will reimburse improperly assessed penalties where warranted. No shouting followed. No spectacle. Just pens moving quickly and cameras capturing the moment authority was asked to answer to the same rules it once enforced. In a small office on the 3rd floor, Holloway packed personal items into a cardboard archive box. A framed commendation. 2 expensive pens. A brass nameplate. The room that had once felt like a throne now felt like storage. He looked at the empty wall where certificates still hung and seemed suddenly smaller than before. Mason Reed stood in the doorway holding a final signature sheet. Holloway signed without speaking. When he handed it back, Mason accepted it politely. Respect offered freely is gentle. Respect demanded by title disappears the moment the title does. "Good luck, sir," Mason said. It was not cruel. Somehow that made it harder to hear. Across town, the public library had become busier than anyone remembered. Naomi Carter sat at a folding table near the reference desk beneath a handwritten sign that now read, "Community Help Hours." Volunteers from local colleges, retired accountants, and 2 attorneys rotated through shifts helping residents understand notices, file appeals, and request records. Naomi never called it a movement. She called it Tuesday. Olivia Grant visited to update her story and found Naomi showing a delivery driver how to dispute a duplicate fine online. "People keep asking if you plan to run for office," Olivia said when they had a quiet moment. Naomi smiled as she straightened a stack of forms. "No, why not?" Olivia asked. Naomi glanced around the room at neighbors helping neighbors, strangers sharing printers, a teenager translating a form for his grandmother. Because power is not the only way to serve. Olivia wrote the sentence down immediately. By afternoon, citizens began receiving emails from the county notifying them of possible refunds. Some amounts were small, $40 here, $90 there. Others were larger. But money was only part of what returned to them. For many, it was the first official message that sounded accountable instead of threatening. Near closing time, the elderly veteran who had come in confused on the first day returned wearing a clean cap and carrying a bakery box. "They reversed my fees," he said proudly. "And I brought pie." Laughter warmed the room. Naomi accepted